A very, take off the glasses, warm welcome to the Find Your Fire tribe. Here we are on our first Fire Friday in over a month, because as those of you who were regulars on my Fire Friday would remember, I took the month of October and a little of November off so that I could work and focus on launching my book. And now that that is out there rolling, I'm happy to be back doing Find Your Fire Fridays with my beloved Fire Tribe. Today, we have a very special person joining us to kick off the Fire Fridays. I have Ms. Nicole Joseph-Chin with me, and she is someone that has so many hats, it's hard to count them all. However, I'm going to do a little bit of counting. She's a global ambassador for women's health and a social impact strategist, whatever that is. And she has become a beneficiary of fellowships from many, many places, including the US State Department, Vital Voices, and other foundations. The government of India is one of them, Johnson & Johnson, and the Bank of America. Some of those names are definitely familiar to us. She's also part of Vital Voices. She is considered a women's network leader and a mentor, I believe. And she is also on called the Inaugural CEO of Colour for the University of the Pacific, California. And she's an active partner for social impact strategy with faculty and student teams at diverse international academic institutions. Now, some of those words were really big for me to read, but I'm going to hand over to Nicole so she can actually explain it to us in real Trini language. So Nicole Joseph-Chin, thank you so much for being here with us today, for joining the tribe. We love you. And I'd like you to tell us in your own words a bit more about Nicole Joseph-Chin.
Thank you. And it's really a pleasure to be here. It's a joy to be here. And I'm also honored to be kicking off your new season of Fire Fridays, particularly because there's so much fire that you just unleashed over the last few weeks. So congratulations on the launch of the Courage to Fly. If I were to use and to coin that phrase, the courage to, that really is the essence of who many of us are. And if you were to ask, that's kind of the essence of where I started the journey, because of the fact that life is an adventure, as you know, right? And for me, I had been in a career that felt like I was not doing the most, for want of a better phrase. I was doing a lot. I had achieved so much and I had accomplished everything. And, you know, funny, sometimes I laugh and I say, I was literally in every department in the organization that I worked for, which was an international financial institution. And I'd literally been in every single department. I'd done everything. I had served in many ways. One of the interesting things that always kept happening was that every department or space of leadership I was inside of that financial institution, I was always called away from my desk to serve differently. So, for example, there was a program focused on youth financial literacy and empowerment that the organization took up at a regional level. And during that program, I was actually called on to go to the schools and to actually be the facilitator of two things: etiquette, which don't ask me how, and economic empowerment. And this was 20-something years ago, right? This was even before these words had names, or these actions had specific names. So I would spend a lot of time away from my desk doing work on behalf of the organization. One of the other things that I always was called to do was to go to communities that were underserved, particularly homes for girls, and spend time there empowering the girls and speaking with them. And this was again during the organization's hours of work, where I would be almost compelled to just say yes, because even when I knew I had work to do and things to do and targets and goals to achieve, I always left my desk. I always said, yes, I'm gone. And many times people couldn't find me and they thought maybe I was frolicking out there, but I was actually at homes for girls, particularly, and at schools, speaking to young leaders and winners and achievers and people who were dreaming. And there was a fire in my belly while that was happening, because I was enjoying my career. I was enjoying all the things that had happened in my career, but I felt like my voice was not loud enough. So I mustered up a lot of courage. I wrote my resignation and I had it on my desktop for about 5 years.
Oh my goodness.
Composed, but I was in my job, but I was always feeling like there was something that was going to happen that needed me to do things differently. So then I got inspired to start a social enterprise in a bedroom in my house. And having started that social enterprise, which was particularly focused on women's health, breast health, and specifically bra fitting, I started asking myself a lot of very hard questions. And in asking those very hard questions, I started to reflect on the places I'd been. And I'd been in some big rooms, because sometimes the chairman of the organization that I worked with, the financial institution, would come to me and ask me to do certain things, which I was like, but I didn't know you knew my name. And so there were many, many very senior leaders in the society at the time that had confidence in me as an individual.
Now, Nicole, how old were you when you started your first social enterprise?
I was actually, so, you know, I have to go back a little bit, because if you ask me that question, it would be somewhere in my teens.
Okay.
Because during my teenage years, one of the things that I always did was on a Saturday, I would leave my house, take a taxi, and go visiting children's homes. And I would do that just to go and do things like play with the children, carry a bag of snacks. God alone knows now why I was carrying unhealthy snacks for the children, but sometimes I'd carry fruit as well. I'd take my spending money and stuff, and I would do that. And then growing up, our parents also had many times during the school vacations, what they would do was, if we didn't travel, they would adopt 2 children from a home, or they would take on a family that was, you know, not necessarily able to meet all of their needs. And one of the things they would let us do, or make us do rather, not let, because we had no choice in the matter, was clean their shoes, iron their clothes, comb their hair.
Serve them.
So it was always, we were raised, I'm the last of 6 children, and we were raised in service to others. So to say when I started my first social action, more than enterprise, it would have been that I was growing up understanding service. But then the formal action would have been while I was in the organization that I worked for, the financial institution. And then I would have actually fast forwarded to that resignation that I wrote, and starting to prime myself and prepare myself for what was going to happen next. So I started, just like anyone who had a big dream, I started really building out what it would look like. Knowing that I had a 10 by 10 room that I could use to have very, very, very random strangers come into my house to be served. So that was the beginning, and that was in my early 30s, actually, late 20s, early 30s. So that's been, I'm in my 50s now. So that's been a good 2 decades and a little more formally.
Okay, that was a good, excellent start. Now, where I see you as I call you a global citizen. Because whenever I talk to Nicole, she's on a plane going somewhere to somewhere to somewhere to do this or to do that or to meet with so-and-so, to come back to Trinidad to change the clothes, etc. Where would you say you live?
Actually, I love that question. You know why? Because sometimes I myself ask myself, where do you live, child? But you know, I consider myself, as you've rightly said, to be a global citizen. One of the things that I have actually also gotten a very strong appreciation of, and I told somebody that this morning, is the amount of access that we have as Trinbagonians that we don't understand, and the level of privilege that we own as having been born here and having a Trinbagonian passport. So I don't know if people understand the power that our passport has. And let me tell you a story, right? Many years ago, I love the African continent and I spend a lot of time on the African continent. And if you ask me where my next home is, it is actually there. And I remember many years ago, we were going, I love road trips, right? So we leave in Johannesburg to drive for 4.5 hours to Swaziland, which is now called Eswatini. And on the road trip is this Trinbagonian, a Kenyan, and an Eswatini national. Well, resident actually. And we're driving, and it suddenly dawns on the Kenyan, wait a minute, I have a one-entry visa, single entry visa to go into Swaziland from Kenya via Johannesburg, because we had a gathering in Johannesburg. She said, so that means I'm going to have to go to the embassy and get a visa to go back to Kenya if I am to leave from Swaziland or Johannesburg. But she had a ticket from Johannesburg. Trinbagonian me, I didn't need a visa. I'm not from the continent. That's the privilege we have. So there we were, road tripping, having a good time, ready and excited about getting to Swaziland, and then realize that Eunice has to now cut her time of leisure and fun short to get to the embassy in Swaziland, the South African embassy, so she can get either an extension on her visa or get a new single entry visa or try and figure out what to do. And I didn't realize how happy-go-lucky we were as a people until that one privileged thing happened. But there were many things in that time in South Africa that said to me that we are global citizens as Trinbagonians. We have access to a lot of things, having been born here, but we also don't understand the value placed on what we have, and we're not grateful. We're actually not grateful sometimes because we don't get it. We don't have to pay for education at primary, secondary school, like some of the other Caribbean islands. We don't have to pay for healthcare if we urgently needed it at a health facility. And we have free lunch in the school, in the school system, and sometimes free lunch everywhere else. So to ask me where I'm from,
Where do you live?
Sorry?
Where do you live?
Yeah. To ask me where I'm from, I'm Trinbagonian, but to ask me where I live in hope and excitement. That's where I live.
Fantastic answer. And where do you spend most of your time?
That's a trick question. You're trying to get me to say on a plane.
When you're talking my language.
Oh my God. Actually, you know where I spend most of my time? In the garden, because that is what gives me peace and relief. And that's also what connects me to everything, because sometimes I could, and I used to actually overdo it. But I acknowledge the value of balance as well. So where I spend most of my time when it's the free time is in my garden. And I don't consider it free time because I'm connecting with nature and I'm actually refueling for that next adventure.
And from the feng shui point of view, we'd say you're grounding. You spend a lot of time, I gather, in the air, one way or the other, whether it be figuratively or literally. And when you spend your time in the garden, you are regrounding, which is very, very important. It's to do with the elements, and you are getting your earth element back into a strong position. So good for you. Now, what do you love most to do? Of all the things you do, work and play, I'd like you to choose one aspect of the work life that you love the most and one aspect of your play life, which might be the garden, but it could equally be, well, the sea or whatever, dancing or whatever. What do you love most to do, both work and play?
With work, I love to speak with people. I love that human connection, conversations. And I reckon sometimes the conversations are so difficult. And because I'm able to express and to really ask the difficult questions, I get the conversations started. So work, my voice. Mm-hmm. And play. Mm-hmm. I love road trips.
I'm just saying something you can share publicly. I saw the wicked look on your face. I said, wow, what's coming?
I love road trips that take me to mysterious places that I didn't know before. So I just love what it means to know the unknown or to discover the unknown. I'll tell you another story, right? In 2019, the word unknown kept coming into a lot of my vocabulary, especially around or towards the end of 2019. And the movie Frozen, one of the theme songs is about Into the Unknown. And that song, because I'm an auntie of many little ones, actually became an earworm during the Christmas season because all the kids got Frozen toys and some of them were actually musical toys that was playing the song Into the Unknown all the time. But I fell in love with the song because I felt like it was saying something. It was telling not just me something, it was telling everybody something. And I'm like, what is that into the unknown that they're talking about in that song? Every day is a little harder, but I could see my powers grow. Don't you know there's part of me that wants to go into the unknown? And I'm like, what exactly is this? And then came the pandemic and the lockdown. And I had to find a way to, like many of us, like the whole world, figure out how to go into the unknown and what were those powers we had to use. And for me, it was like that song had prepared me. But when I started enjoying that song, it was playful. And it was part of a playful experience. And I want you to play that song whenever you get a chance. And it could be irritated if you don't like that kind of screechy high pitch, right? But then it was such a lesson and a connection for me, like, you know, and I had to vocalize it many times. And I actually play that song still because it's like, this was Disney playing on our emotions with a song. But here it was grounding me, probably, if you want to use that word. But, you know, I tell that story to just show that sometimes while we are probably not able to unfold the mysteries. So for example, that word that kept coming up, you know, about unknowing and that whole thing about discovery and my whole curiosity that gets me excited about not knowing where we're going, but going somewhere. And, you know, are we there yet? That anticipation, that is something that really, really gets me excited because we really don't know, but we also don't know what we don't know. And while we're discovering, we could sometimes be so wowed and so excited that that is the real essence.
I love your sense of adventure. And it makes me think that you'd be a great person to do a road trip with because no matter what happens, you are ready to find the gift in it, the joy in it, the excitement in it, and to deal with it. And that's a perfect partner. Now, Nicole, there was something that you're involved with that I've always wanted to know more about. Can you tell us a little bit about Vital Voices and what they do and what you do there?
Whoa, so yes, Vital Voices is the most incredible organization in the world. And I say it with no reservation, and I also say it without buttering up. It's a place that was an organization that was founded by Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright 25 years ago. But in doing so, it was also to get to the essence of really creating a space for women, a safe space, for us to use our voices for good. But in so doing, they also wanted to challenge us to do many other things, inclusive of paying it forward. And one of the things that is really, really exciting about that is that we are a community of doers, of change agents, change makers. But the other thing is this: we have our agenda, which is to change the world, but we come with so many diverse ways of our, of who we are, that one of the things that we are always and often given is the opportunity to first appreciate others, other cultures, other mindsets, other situations. And I'm going to come back to the conversation around privilege now again, right? I remember many years ago being in one of our community conversations. And whilst there, all the women were talking about what they were working on, because we're all working on something very important.
And there are women all over the world, correct?
We are from 148 countries. Mm-hmm. And whilst we were having that conversation, there was 75 of us in a room. And while we were having the conversations, some of the women were dealing with things I'd never known existed. I knew it existed, but only in a textbook, right? So I never met someone who had survived genital mutilation, but I met not just one, but many. I had never met someone who had been in a genocide, in a country that had experienced genocide. I met not one, but many. I had never met someone who was in a country in conflict. And I'm talking real conflict. I ain't talking, conflict, it affects everybody, right? And it's real to whomever is the person as an inhabitant in that space. But real conflict like war. And war for a multiplicity of years. And I found myself feeling small in the room because I had nothing to talk about.
You had carnival. You could talk about Carnival and Tobago beaches.
I talk about the beaches. But I was able to relate to the human rights issues that were being spoken of or treated with, but we don't know what hardship is. So again, it empowers women who are ready to change the world. Why am I there? I was selected as a woman who has been doing a lot of advocacy work in women's health to change the world. What do I want to do? Continue doing that and growing our community so that we can make sure things like this are not conversations that feel remote to us, but that you see the change. Let me tell you two of the most dynamic things that happened in 2018. And I have a lot of stories. I hope we have time. In 2018, I was one of 100 women of Vital Voices, and there are over 20,000 of us in the community. And they selected 100 women, 100 of us, to participate in a series of activities, including women's retreats around the world. And this particular retreat was in Silicon, well, it was in Half Moon Bay in California. And it was sponsored by Johnson & Johnson. And of the women that were there were two situations that were happening at the time. I'm not sure if you know of what's going on, what's been going on in Cameroon for many years, inside of a civil war space with a lot of discrimination, a lot of very, very unfortunate situations, particularly with violence against communities, the Anglophone and the Francophone. So one of our peers, one of the 100 women in the room, is actually the leader of an opposition party in Cameroon. Her name is Ka. We're at breakfast and we're told that some of Ka's party members, by virtue of the things they were doing to ease and appease some of the situations, the political situations, the socio-political situations in their community, were actually arrested and locked up. The other person who is one of the 100 women who was with us on that retreat is or was the former Minister of Education in Nigeria. And she's the person that was responsible for starting the Bring Back Our Girls campaign when the girls were actually, the Chibok girls were kidnapped with the Boko Haram. So we wake up that morning to two sets of bad news. That, well, not to two sets of bad news, to two sets of situations that are going on. The girls are still kidnapped and hidden, and we're sure having a lot of different social, and other things happening with them. And Ka's party members are imprisoned, well, arrested. So 100 of us in the room decided we are going to use our voices and our cell phones and our influence as women change agents in that room. So Kawala is in the room with us, but we decided we created a hashtag, Free Kawala. We created that hashtag. Hillary Clinton was tagged, and because she is the founder of the organization. And we tagged a whole series of other influential people. We all went to bed, went to sleep, come back the next morning for breakfast. And Obi comes down to the dining room and her eyes are moist, damp. And she says, I have a story of rejoicing to tell you all. And Ka comes down for breakfast and she says, I have a story of rejoicing to tell you all. A story of victory to tell you all. The leaders of her country wanted to know who was Vital Voices. What organization had so much power that we pressured them with our phones and our voices to free Kawala. Her party members were all released. That was the victory that Ka had to share. But guess what was the other victory? Obi says to us, this morning, they released 100 of our girls. We don't play in Vital Voices. But the other thing is we work hard. And we work hard, but we also work collectively. We collaborate. The women in that organization have no time for playing small. We do not play small. We also have no time for judgment. And we don't wait. We don't wait. We reach out to each other to ask, how can I help you? But we don't just ask, we take action. So if I say to Wendy, I'm picking you up at X hour to do this, and you're not ready, we gone because we have this to do. You will meet us there though, because we're going to do it. So
Nicole,
we are that.
Nicole, I dress in 2 minutes, girl. I'll be ready.
So we are that people. One of the things we do as well is we use each other's work to send energy and strength to each other. This necklace I'm wearing was made by men who are in prison. And it's to honor a woman who in El Salvador started this business, this social enterprise, to encourage or to discourage men from creating gender-based violence crimes so that they would have something to do whilst in prison, earn income, and create something that adorned and made women feel beautiful. And this actually has gone into collections from Diane von Furstenberg, DVF, who is also on the board of Vital Voices and one of our very avid supporters in all the things that we do. So the other thing is, behind the scenes, we have some exceedingly powerful women who support us.
I would have to say in front of the scenes, you also do.
Yeah, that too. And what they do is they support the voices that we have. And they don't judge us. We don't have time for that. We're busy. You come with a crazy idea at 2 in the morning, and a sister is able to listen and help us to execute and find a resource for us to execute.
Now, Nicole, you're saying this is a worldwide organization. It's over 148 countries, 20,000 women. How do those women find their way to Vital Voices? Let's say someone listens to this replay, or someone who's on Facebook right now and says, this is my kind of group. I have so much to give. I want to be a part of Vital Voices. Is it something you apply to or something you are invited to? Or do you have to be involved in certain kind of things?
It's a combination because we have programs. So there are programs you can apply for. And some, if it is that, first of all, look for what is your passion. Find your passion first. And inside of there, align yourself to something that is going to mean that you're going to dedicate that action. Because one of the things we want to also look at is, are you really fulfilling that passionate need? So you can apply for a program. We have in Trinidad and Tobago an annual event called the Global Mentoring Walk. I want people to participate. That participation is really where it starts because of the fact that in participating, you understand a little bit more about the culture. We have a culture of change. And we do have women in Trinidad and Tobago who are Vital Voices recipients. There are not many of us, but there are at least 4 of us. And so maybe 6. But one of the things, again, it's all about collaboration. So we encourage people to collaborate, to partner, to join the activities that we're doing. So one of the best things to do is to join our Global Mentoring Walk, which happens every March. And then we consistently and continually build engagement following that activity and following that event.
Would you please, when it's time, please post that info in my tribe or in my
Absolutely.
so that I can share it with my people. Now,
right. Absolutely.
So Nicole, the topic that we were talking about today is how you found your voice for good. Now, from all that you have said, it is very clear that you have a strong, passionate, vibrant, really powerful voice for good. But how did you find that? Was it because of your childhood with your parents? When did you and how did you find this huge passion, I call it ikigai, in Nicole to be a voice for good? Tell us.
So again, it was part of my growing up and being raised. But then when I was in the financial sector, I also operated in a very privileged spot. I'm going to admit it. So I was in leadership at a very young age. And I also moved up very, very quickly in the organization. And I got bored. I really got bored because you know that expression, been there, done that.
Mhm.
Been there, done that. And then I'm also multilingual. I'm fluent in French and Spanish. So what I didn't do in English in the bank, I did in French or Spanish because I also served international clients. And one of the things that really kept coming back to me while I was in that space was how unhappy wealthy people were. And how unfulfilled wealthy people were. Because I did have a portfolio that was of the wealthier. And when I interacted with them, there were lots of them that was sweet and kind and well-grounded and balanced. And there were those that, oh my gosh, I didn't know you all were siblings because you all come to the bank and you all don't talk to each other. And you sit with a newspaper in your face until you hear next. And then you go to that person to get whatever you've done. But I only discovered you all were siblings when your father died and I came to the funeral. So I saw a lot of those kinds of pieces of dis-ease. And I also acknowledged that sometimes we also just have to understand what we can do to change things. So I knew I wasn't coming back into financial space. I knew I wasn't going to come back into the corporate world ever unless I were in another capacity, which I do as well. But I also understood that I had to serve. And that in serving, my voice was going to have to change. I was going to have to change the treble and the bass. The rhythm was going to have to change. And I was also going to have to say hard things and say difficult things to people, including no. And I had to also understand that sometimes I had to say nothing. So I learned that in having to find my voice, I had to also be curious enough to show up in certain places. So in certain forums that I went to locally, where things didn't make sense, I would ask. And not everybody likes to be challenged because who's this little girl coming to ask?
I can see it now.
Who's this little girl? When she come out, what's she coming to ask me? Who she think she is? But we need to ask the hard questions. So I started to navigate that route of, if I don't get the answer, I'm going to create a solution. Because one of the other things that I don't believe in is not having the solution to a problem. Don't come to me with a problem if you don't have a checklist that we can probably say this might work as the solution or the way to navigate or get past this problem. So I then acknowledged that I had to have solutions. So I started to design solutions, and those solutions might have been a conversation, a product, a service, an intervention, a collaboration, or sometimes an exit. And I also had to understand the power of letting go. Because sometimes, you know, that expression, the fat lady sings, she lets go herself and she just belts out whatever needs to be lifted into the world. So sometimes I had to be that fat lady that sang. And sometimes you had to know that you sing from your core. So I had to also develop my guts. I had to develop that whole sense of being strong enough to know that sometimes rejection would come. Sometimes opposition would come. But I was also okay with that. Because sometimes the things that miss you are really because something better is coming. So I had to learn that in finding my voice, there were things I had to lose as well. So I was okay. I was prepared to lose those things, including relationships and friendships, including challenging the status quo, including losing opportunities that came to me that if I wasn't flying with you or going along with what you wanted, I was considered, okay, well, you can't. And I was also okay with that, because sometimes when those tiny doors closed, massive, grand doors with beautiful lined carpets with plenty people who are ready to do the work collectively was on the other side. So I also recognized I had to become fearless.
That word comes up over and over again. Fearless, courage. And you have actually touched a few nerves for me, because you've read my book. Remember the chapter when I said, if my being in the cockpit meant another empty kitchen, I was okay with that. If you having your strong, powerful voice meant other people were pissed off, I'm sure you're okay with that. Yeah? Yes. So Nicole, you realize this. There's nothing for it. You have to write a book.
Wendy is setting me up.
I'm setting you up in public.
I want to make a bold confession, right?
Yes.
When I left when I left the financial institution, okay, I need to just go back a little bit to that, right? So I had my resignation written, and I had it written on my desktop for like 4 or 5 years, close to 5 years. And I eventually hit print in 2006 after having started my social enterprise in 2002. So I had it there for 4 years pretty much. And then I resigned and left on December 29th, 2006. I was a free bird, right? But yes, when I left, one of the things that I started doing was writing my book. And I wrote about 12 chapters. That was 2006.
Okay, no worries, half done. Nicole?
But since then, I have 5 manuscripts for 5 books, right? Wendy, I probably just need your help, your coaching, your mentoring. This is what Vital Voices does, right? But let me just challenge the women in Trinidad and Tobago who want to be a part of Vital Voices, have to do things like this. Have to jump in and say, hey, let me jump in and help you do this. That's what we do. That's what the sisters do. That's what the sisterhood does. And it's a kind of weird kind of taking ownership where you feel like, oh my God, you just took away my power. But what you did was you just gave me power because you could finish my book for me. Things like that. You know, I'm just saying, right? That kind of leader, that kind of bold leadership.
Nicole, you call me when you're ready. I will give you guidance from what I learned doing my first and only book. I'm gonna say that we are now ready. Out of time, I want to ask if anybody, Cherie or Colette, have any questions for you. There's a few people on Facebook. I'm just checking to see if they have any questions for you. If you guys have any questions, please write them for Nicole now, because we actually have we have been going on such a roll. I didn't pay attention to the time. Cherie and Colette, do you have anything to ask or say to Nicole?
Colette, do ever be quiet. What happened to she? Colette, you have a question?
She's actually written on the chat. Yeah, but feel free to jump in, Cherie. She wants to commend Nicole for her amazing work. All right, and so do I too. And earlier she said, woohoo, Nicole in the house. Yes, in the Fire Tribe. So Nicole.
I'm just trying to antagonize Mojo here. So that's why I'm so quiet. Very, very fun, interesting, and inspiring chat today. I quite enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cherie. So, Nicole, I want to say a huge thank you for being here with us and for the passion and the power and the excitement and just the love that you shared with us in the last 45 minutes, the love for who you really are, for what you do, and for the women of this planet. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for all that you are and all that you do. Many blessings.
Thank you. Same to you. And call me to serve at any time and to use my voice for good.
Fantastic. Terry and Colette, and for those of you who joined us on Facebook, for those of you who watch the replay, if you want to get in touch with Nicole, she is one of the tribe members. You can reach out to her on the tribe. And of course, I'm sure through her many different websites. Okay, so many blessings to you all. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.